Welcome to Guest Talks with Tracy Arvine. Bringing you special guest interviews from musictalks.xyz.
Well, hi everybody, I'm back again for our Guest Talks segment, and this Guest Talks is, he's done so much, I actually don't know how he fits it all in. Mr. Jason Davis, he's spent basically 2 decades in the music industry. He's worked with many of the worldwide stars, including Boyz II Men, Sugar Ray, P. Diddy, Alabama, Dolly Parton, and amongst just so many more. He's been an entertainment industry executive. Excuse me, everybody. You can tell that I've got a little bit of a flu going on here, but that's okay. He's been in the entertainment industry. He's been an executive with a broad range of titles, including award-winning songwriter, award-winning author, independent record label president, TV producer. In fact, there's so much. Maybe I'll let Jason come in and let us know a little bit more about what he's done in his life so far. Welcome, Jason.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the wonderful introduction.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, I was falling apart a little bit. I guess the listeners aren't really used to hearing me like this, but I guess they'll know. But it's winter here, you see, so... yeah, it's about 1 degree here tonight. People don't think it gets that cold in Sydney, but yeah. So
have you had your whole career in Australia?
Yeah, yes, I did a little bit of work in England, and I actually did some work in Pasadena actually as well, over in LA.
Oh, great!
Yeah,
great.
That was a long time ago though. So yeah, did a little bit of work over there. I worked with Average White Band, Hamish Stewart.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I wrote and recorded a few. We did quite a few great tracks actually in London quite a while ago. Wow. I've still got them in the can. I've got hundreds, as you would know, as a songwriter as well.
Sure.
And there's so many just sitting there, and you go back to listen to them, and you go, maybe I could redo that.
Yes.
Yeah. So to just tell us a little bit about, how you began with music. How did it all start for you? You just love playing music, or how did you enter the whole industry?
Well, it was always music for me. I feel that God planted the passion seed for music in me. Mm-hmm. And I remember being a very little kid, and I'd see any kind of music act on TV and just be totally enthralled by it. And I remember my best friend across the street when I was a little kid growing up. He was a little bit older than me, and he had vinyl record album covers on his wall,
right,
pinned to his wall. And I just remember being so fascinated by the album covers. And we actually, me and my friend, when we were little across the street, we wrote our first song together, I think around 6 or 7 years old, and we actually tried to form a band.
Wow.
when we were probably 8 or 9 years old.
Right.
And formed my first real band when I was 13 years old. And probably from 14 we started playing concerts, and I started booking shows, and I'd book shows at local schools, and we'd book backyard shows and basement shows in our friends' basements, and just anywhere we could play. And I started writing songs at 13, but really got serious about songwriting when I was 16.
Right.
And just kind of spent, the next 8 years of my life with a guitar in my hand, hours a day. I'd probably finish about 30, 40 songs a year. And then fast forward about 8 years later, when I was 23, just one of my songs before the internet traveled about 1,500 miles. I was living in upstate New York, and it landed on the desk of a record executive in Nashville.
Right.
And next thing you know, I had, he tracked me down, called me, and next thing you know, I had about 6 months later, I had a hit song on the radio. So
wow.
it was something I never planned for. It just, I just did it for years, and obviously when you do anything for so many years, you get good at it.
Yeah.
And the byproduct was that people started sharing my songs and spreading my songs, and
yeah.
yeah.
And now the songs that you had, you also received several awards for your songs. Were they from this time that you were writing and recording? Was it around that time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say my first year and a half, the first year and a half in the music industry, I landed, I think it was 8 songs I wrote on major albums. I mean, this is going back, 20 years ago, but I landed 8 songs with companies that were EMI companies or Warner Brothers companies. Yeah. And one of those records was a Spanish record. I don't speak Spanish, but they translated my song, Warner Music. It was way Latina at the time.
Okay.
But Warner Music translated the songs I wrote into Spanish and put them on a Spanish record. So won an award with that record. Her name was Francesca Cezanne.
Okay.
And then this guy, Aaron Benward, I had his first single, and that song went to #1, and I won some ASCAP awards for that. So, right. But that was all. That was all pretty much in the first year I was in the music business.
Wow. So even though I guess this is quite a common story when artists. A lot of people say it's an overnight thing. When you really actually do find out all the hard work that they've done in previous years, it's in a way it's like you've done all this work as you mentioned, but when it actually does happen, it happens quite quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people, when you hear like you're in Australia, and I always tell people I use Gautier a lot as a reference because the guy wins a Grammy Award for Song of the Year in 2012. For the song Somebody That I Used to Know, and he wrote and recorded that song literally out of his parents' house. But what people don't know is that for 11 years he was writing and recording songs out of his parents' house. And so when you hear Somebody That I Used to Know, a Grammy Award winning song, you're really hearing 11 years in 3 minutes.
Yes. Yeah.
When I was a little kid and I saw Michael Jackson moonwalk across the stage for the first time, I couldn't process as a kid that I was watching 20 years of dancing in 30 seconds. And so one of my huge passions now that I've been doing this for so long is, I see there's such a Grand Canyon divide of knowledge from the inner circle of the music industry, the record labels, the major managers, the publishers, to the kid on the street or the parents of the kid on the street. Like there's just such a lack of knowledge and information for how all these groups in music history actually really did it. And people just kind of think people get discovered, and it's just so far from reality.
Yeah.
And there was always a plan. There was always songs first. There was always a little bit of attention first, and but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting that I do see, and I receive a lot of emails and messages from, I guess, artists who are just starting up, or I'll see something and someone says, look, I've been at this for 6 months and I still can't get it going. And I just go, oh, wow.
I've met endless amounts of people that have been doing it for 6+ years and they don't have a lot to show for it. And, it's just, I sometimes tell people this, in this business, as an artist, you have to make a transition to mentally thinking of yourself as a singer and you are a singer, and it's definitely the massive part of your craft, but you really mentally have to transition to a product creator.
Yes.
And the artists that get great at, shaping a product, whether it's a vision for a record, or, you know, having the right songwriters around them, or learning just how to share their vision with producers and songwriters. But, you know, I think so much of this business is nailing the product first.
Yeah.
And most people getting into it just don't fully understand how much the product really does have to be nailed.
Yeah, it's really funny you should say that. I think on my last 2 podcasts, we've spoken a lot about business and product. And I think two podcasts ago now, I spoke to a business guy, an entrepreneur, a friend of mine, who's not in music at all. And we were just drawing the parallels between how, you know, another kind of business and how music should really work in the same manner, in the same way, thinking of yourself as a product. And a lot of it has to do with your mindset. A lot of it has to do with strategy and your plans. And this is something that I've been trying to also get across to a lot of artists. And I'm not sure if they're getting that. You know, and it is a mind.
No,
it's difficult to try and just tell them, look, this you have to. Yeah, sorry, you go ahead. You sorry.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear
and so sorry to interrupt, but I often will lead people here in the U.S. We have a show, TV show called Shark Tank.
Oh yes. Shark Tank.
I think in the UK there's a show called like London and Canada. I believe they have a show called Dragon's Den.
Okay.
And, you know, these are investor, you know, entrepreneur investor type shows.
Yeah, we have a few of those too. Yeah.
And I tell people to watch those shows because no one walks in a room with an investor without a product. Mm-hmm. The product in this business is the recorded songs, the original songs. And, you know, if you watch one of those TV shows and you watch somebody walk in without a product, I mean, they don't have a chance to get a deal. And if the product has flaws, or if the product is just one level below competitive to what you're seeing in the industry, or hearing in the industry, I should say, but, you know, you're not going to get a deal on those shows. So, you know, it takes a long time from my experience, in my opinion, to become a great product creator. And it's taken me a lot of years and a lot of relationships and a lot of failure and successes and learning from each. And it's very hard for an aspiring artist to piece that all together.
Yes. I've also read that you're a serial entrepreneur. So are there other things? I mean, you've also, you're an author as well. So what else do you do in the business world?
Well, I've always had a passion for just, you know, I think music is my ultimate passion. It's the bullseye of my, you know, God and music are the bullseyes of my passion. But really, I think the underlying passion and really what fuels everything for me is watching people's lives grow around me. Mm-hmm. I get unusually excited whether, you know, right now I have, you know, we have a big college here in Nashville called Belmont University, and I've got literally 5 different interns from the college that all work for me in various companies and positions. And, you know, the idea that I could take one of these young people at Belmont at university, and then I could potentially, you know, give them a job or lead them to starting their own company. Mm-hmm. I mean, I already have one student at Belmont University that I've led to start her own company. Wow. And she's doing better, you know, currently in Belmont with her own company than most people that have their own companies.
Right.
And so, and you know, in that situation, I don't have a piece of her company. But I get excited over watching people grow, and whether that's a songwriter or a producer or a music artist or a person I feel is talented or gifted in business, I love watching. You know, I love meeting somebody and knowing, okay, like they're living in an apartment right now and they're single, and then, you know, 2-3 years later they're getting married and they're buying their first home, and
Yeah.
they have cars in the driveway, and they have a child, and just getting to
And
watch
no mortgage.
somebody's life. Yeah. And just trying to get watching somebody's life grow is probably my one of my most exciting parts of what I do. And so whether that's growing a business, growing a company, like I'm a partner and a co-president of a booking agency where we book tours and speakers for events. And, that's not a company that I started, but
Right.
that's where I met the owner of the company, whose name is Jasmine Roll, who's, just a super, super unbelievable man.
Right.
And we just had this synergy, and I saw some areas vision-wise where I could grow what he was doing, and he had completely nailed some areas on his own with his business. And so it's just, to me, it's all about growing ideas, growing people, businesses, so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's a huge area of excitement for me.
Yeah, I mean, I found a secret passion. I think sometimes when you're also working things out along the way, when you haven't done anything like this before, is you find other areas that you end up loving and not realizing it before. So unless you try and do different things, you won't know what else there is available and what's out there, what's around the corner in any given situation.
Yes, totally. And to add to that, that's an exciting statement you just made for me. to add to that, I feel like that thought process that you just mentioned is kind of the early stages and the mid stages of a career. When you get, like, I've been doing this for 21 years, so and it was 10 years before that pursuing it, as an aspiring person.
Yes.
So this is really 31 years of my life.
Yeah.
And at this point, a lot of the businesses that I start, or a lot of the businesses that I'm a part of, are weak areas I found in the business. Like,
Yeah.
just realizing for years, like, wow, like nobody is really servicing artists well in this area. Yeah. And people aren't loving on artists well or fighting for artists in this area.
Yeah.
And this is a problem, and keeping my eye out and ear out over the years for a solution. And then maybe meeting that one person out of 100 that actually does that job or does that thing better than anyone I've ever met, and then teaming up with them and saying, let's turn this into a company.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I get excited when I see things and I see a big hole in it, and I think, oh, why hasn't anybody thought of that yet? So, but I won't go into that. So, look, you also have, I would love to come back to that, speaking about the product kind of thing, and I guess drawing a parallel to other businesses. But I just want to ask you first is, you also have had a lot to do with the securing record deals with some of the largest companies in the world, Capitol, Sony, Island, Def Jam. So from which stage, when you had your hits, what happened after then? When did you decide to move into, I guess, is it management you went into after that stage, or? Yeah.
I one of the early record label meetings, I mean, it's probably in the first year, I would say, maybe year and a half. But one of the first record labels meetings I ever had, it was at Sony Music, 550 Madison Avenue in New York. And at the time, there was a guy named Marvin Peart, who is now in the movie business and TV business. Great guy. And at the time, he was the senior vice president of the biggest record label through Sony Music.
Right.
And big guy. And he discovered Macy Gray and signed her. He discovered this old pop group named 3LW, which eventually became the Cheetah Girls. And he also signed Mandy Moore. And so I was in a meeting with him, playing him songs, and he pulled out this picture. And this is probably, a year or two before Mandy Moore came out, but he had just signed her. And he pulled out a picture of Mandy Moore, and he goes, "I'm looking for songs for this girl." And then he described kind of like the types of songs, and it just kind of clicked for me in that moment, like, wow, like, okay, like I'm writing these songs, but I also could find this guy that I'm sitting with, like the girl or the guy, and that idea became even more exciting to me than writing songs, because when I wrote songs personally, most of the songs I would write, I wrote on my own.
Right. And,
I was able to land songs on records because I had written, probably 300 to 500 songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got very good at it. But the idea of actually finding a singer or finding an artist was so exciting, because here I was getting into these record label meetings and getting into these record label buildings, 20 years ago, and my brains were exploding. My heart was exploding. Like, I couldn't believe I was getting to meet with these people, and they were like actually listening to me. And so it was like more than I could even dream was coming true.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost felt, in a sense, like I was on like a beach vacation by myself. And I'm looking at the most amazing mountains and the most amazing view, and I had nobody to share it with. And so the thought of like finding an artist or a singer and kind of working with them and developing them and getting them ready to walk through those doors with me.
Yes. Yeah.
Felt like, you know what? Like I could share my vacation photos with another person, and we could jump up and down together, and we could, we could hug each other together and cry together. And so the idea of bringing somebody through the doors that were blowing my mind was so exciting to me.
Right.
So I immediately, once that light bulb went off, I immediately shifted into like, I want to find people more talented than me. I want to find people with the same passion as me that are talented, but maybe they don't have the business acumen,
right,
or the perseverance to push through these doors that I'm getting through.
Right. Yes.
And so yeah, that's where that started for me.
I believe you have, from my understanding and from what I know, I believe you have a great ear and you can spot, a talented or a hit a mile off. You just know how to pick them. Am I correct in saying that you have this amazing? I don't know. Is it like a sense for knowing what a?
Yeah, it's definitely something I've learned. I learned very early on in my career before the music industry. When I was 18 years old, I started managing a music retail store, and this had nothing to do with me getting into music, in the music industry.
Right.
So I was running like a store that was selling like cassette tapes and CDs and, a music store in a mall, in a shopping mall.
Right. Yes.
And I was a
when they
retail
existed.
Yes, exactly. And so I was a retail manager, and I noticed that I had a knack for hiring special people and finding special people, and taking maybe somebody that was more ordinary and positioning them, even at that early stage of my life, in a store, just in the right positions. And I'll never forget my boss at the time, when I was 18, 19 years old. My boss came in, who was like this district manager who kind of oversaw like 15, 20 stores for the company. He came into my store one day, right after I'd taken it over, like maybe a few months later, and his jaw like hit the floor, and he was like having a hard time like gathering his thoughts, and he pulled me into the back room of the store, and he said, "What have you done?" Like he's like, in my whole career, I've never seen somebody turn around a store in months. Like, this doesn't even look like the same store. Like, It doesn't even, like, when you walk in, it looks different. all the employees are different. Everywhere I look, it feels like there's superstar employees in the store.
Mm.
And
You've
it just came very
changed
naturally.
The vibe of things. So.
Yeah, and so I've noticed over the years that when I meet somebody, and I'm very careful about who I meet. I mean, we have a pretty unbelievably selective process with people around me. Very selective process of actually who would land, in my office at this stage.
Right.
But I've always had this knack for seeing something special within somebody.
Right.
So when I'm sitting with somebody, I feel like I could see their spirit.
Right.
And I feel like I could actually feel them.
Right.
And I feel like I see like just something unbelievably special about this person in front of me that maybe other people kind of just like, oh, that's just a guy or that's just a girl. And then what I've found is everything I do from that comes from that place. So when I'm working on songs with an artist, or I'm working on photos, or I'm working on I see something so special, and I communicate that with everybody around me or anybody that they would work with. And that thing that I see informs all of my communication, all of my decisions, and shaping everything that I'm doing with them. And I find that often you get to the end result, and that could be a year or two later of developing somebody.
Yeah.
And the end result is I actually see come to fruition in real life the vision I had when I first met them. Like watching a flower blossom. And so I feel like that's why I've had a lot of success. And then, when I'm talking to people in the industry, I'm talking to them with that kind of passion.
Right.
And explaining to them how special, what I see is. And I just find when you lead with like really loving someone and really caring about them and seeing something special and knowing that that thing is from God and this is a responsibility and this is somebody's dream and it's sensitive and it's delicate and really like honoring just doing what you say you're going to do. I mean, even in the industry, like what's bought me favor over the years is I'm a stickler with myself for doing what I say I'm going to do. Yeah. And the Bible says, like, let your yes be yes and let your no be no. And I always, I'm not saying that I've done that perfectly over 21 years. I've had my share of mistakes and shortcomings and situations I wish I could get back. I think anybody who's been in business that long has those moments. But if I tell somebody something's happening, it happens. If I owe somebody $1, they get it. They don't have to chase me for it. So I always do whatever I say I'm going to do. Yeah. And I think that's also bought artists I work with some additional favor. Because people are very open. When you honor people in life and business, people become open to you. One last thing too, I'm also very honest with the industry and people I meet. And so when I'm talking to record labels or publishers, like I don't sell gold and deliver silver. No. I like if I'm dealing with silver, I tell people it's silver, but I believe that we could get to gold.
Right.
And if I have gold, I tell people it's gold. So people know that I never try to sell anybody anything. When it comes to a project, I just try to make the project and the music as unbelievable as possible. So when you press play, you don't have to sell it.
Yes,
that's a big thing I've learned in the music industry is what you're trying to accomplish is you're trying to get songs where you do not have to say one word to somebody.
You let them speak for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, they press play and it does all the work.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I have to agree with you with all of that as well. You're a man of your word. And that's, trust as well. Trust is a really big thing in business.
Sure is.
And everybody around you and everybody watching you. And if, I know, it's one thing that I hate letting people down. And even though I don't have anybody to really rely on sort of above me for running my site, the thing is I like to stick to my, I put limits and timelines on certain things, and they have to come out, and that's the way that is, because I don't like letting anybody down. Yes, so I don't like letting anybody down either, and it has a lot to do with trust. Yeah, I think it's a really important point. There is, there are still a lot of people that are untrustworthy in the whole industry, as there are, I guess, yes. A lot of yes, and I guess there's a lot of young people who are starting out as well that don't have that experience to know what's right and what's wrong and what's and that can be really hard, for anybody starting out. But I heard a story. I understand, you're not a person who gives up. You're very persistent, and this is one thing that a lot of people give up on doing. They might try and, just try an email or a phone call once, and then they wait for that person to get back to them. I heard a story about your persistence and how it paid off. Can you let us know a little bit about that story of when you tried to make you played phone tag with?
I think that was a story about first time I met this woman, Lee Dene, who used to be with Columbia Records.
Right. I love this story. I just love this story. So if you can tell it for our audience.
And this story is not really unique to my journey. I mean, this story is just a reflection of really who I am.
Right.
And I won't say who I am, but how I act in business, or a business principle. Maybe that's better way to say it, of mine. But I'm very persistent, in love and kindness always. But, so basically I was in the early stages of my career, had landed a bunch of songs on records, had gotten a couple of people record deals. I was probably, about a year in, something like that. And there was a woman at Columbia Records who was the vice president of A&R at the time. Her name was Lee Dene. Mm-hmm. She was a absolutely amazing person. And, but she was very busy. She was the person that signed John Mayer to a record deal.
Okay.
And she signed this other guy, Sean, I wish I could remember his name right now. He was fantastic. Sean Mullins, I think was his name, maybe. And a couple other big groups, but John Mayer was the big one. And I really wanted to get in with her. I had not met her yet. I'd met some other people, at different labels, but not her. And so I called her. I left her a message. I didn't hear back. And what I started doing is I started leaving her a message very kindly, very nicely, super professional. Started leaving her a message once a week. After about, I would say maybe 3 to 4 weeks, I was out, and this is back in the day of like answering machine tapes,
right?
Before cell phones. So, so I went out, and she had tried to call me back about 3 to 4 weeks later, but I was out. And so when I got back, I realized that I missed her call, which was like so discouraging. Mm-hmm. And then I tried to call her back, the second I got the message, and I didn't get her again. And then I ended up calling again for another 3 to 4 weeks and did no return call. And then I was out again, and she tried to call me, and I missed her second call.
Oh my gosh.
Now we're probably like close to 2 months in. And what she left on my message voicemail at that time, the second time, really struck me, and I felt like it taught me a lesson in business. And she said to me, she said, "Jason, I'm so sorry. I've been slow to get back to you. I know you've been trying to call for a while. I just want to let you know I'm calling you back because I appreciate your persistence so much." And you know what many people would feel would be totally annoying somebody, this business person actually respected. And so I tried to call her back right away. I didn't get her. I called her literally for another 3 to 4 weeks, probably 4 weeks, and finally she called one day and I got her. And we scheduled a meeting, and from the moment I called the first time to the moment I walked into that meeting was 3 months. And the second I met her for the rest of the time she was at Columbia Records, it was an open door policy with me. I mean, I could get a response to an email within a day. I could schedule a meeting with her within 3 to 4 days, because now I had that face-to-face connection.
Yeah.
But even recently, I mean, if we go to today, there's a new artist I've developed over the last 3 years who's awesome, named Austin French, and unbelievable guy, brilliant guy and artist, and has become dear to me, dear friend, family. But Austin, he's got a song called Wide Open on his new record. And I mean, that song, from the moment I started talking to the producer about my idea for who Austin could write with, and I mean, it was like a year-long process of follow-ups and to get it to where it is today. And so I've always, persistence is, I think, one of the areas where a lot of younger artists or aspiring artists are lacking. And, there is incredible breakthrough that happens when you don't give up on somebody, or you don't give up on your passion or dream.
Yeah, exactly. I can hear what you're saying. I see a lot of artists, even artists that I might contact myself, asking for an interview, for example, and they don't even return a message. And that, I think, you're so talented. This is unbelievable, but this is where the big downfall is.
I have literally, not once, not twice, I have literally led music artists, singers, to major record deal offers, to major record deal interest. And they don't return the vice president of the record label's phone calls.
I just can't get that.
And then the vice president of the record label would call me back and say, "Is everything okay? Like, they're not calling me back." And then I would call the artist, and the artist would say, "I'm just nervous to call them. I don't know what to say." Oh. I'm like, that's not gonna help you, right? You have to return people's phone calls. And I had one situation early in my career, literally 21 years ago, where there was a girl I'd met. I won't tell you her last name, but her name was Virginia, and she was so cool. And I brought her into, actually it was Marvin Peart's office, and I didn't bring her. I brought her a song that I had kind of written with her, and a picture of her, and Marvin wanted to sign her at Sony, and he set up a meeting with Polly Anthony, who was at the time the president of the label, and she literally did not show up to the meeting with Sony Music. And then and I remember I talked to her afterwards. I was like, what, trying to figure out what happened. And she actually said to me on the phone, she's like, "Is it okay that I didn't go?" And I said, "Well, and I wasn't, I was like, well, if you want to get a record deal, it wasn't okay." And then about 4 months later, I hear and I find out that she signed a record deal with literally some guy in a small town, like, that was working literally like out of his basement, who had never done this before and had, didn't know what he was doing. And I mean, it was like beyond, it was beyond a small label. It was like literally some guy in his basement. Like, and
Wow.
like but sometimes just the idea of success or the idea of the unknown of what success brings, success, if you're grounded and you've got a good family and you've got the right team, you got the right manager, and success is very rewarding, and it's very exciting, and it's not easy, but it's it's amazing.
Yeah.
But because sometimes when success happens, people don't know, like, what does this do to my life? And the reality is it doesn't change much. It's just, you're playing more shows, you're getting paid more to play shows. You're meeting more people. You're meeting more people that were affected by your songs, and so yeah. But
and there's more people around you as well to help you out.
Yeah. But I mean, I find often, even the biggest artists in the world, I mean, usually it's a very tight, small team. It is a team, but it's usually not a very big team.
Right.
And usually the teams I find that, artists I work with or partnerships I have where we work with artists or just situations I've been a part of over the years. I mean, it's usually smaller, as far as a team than most people would think. But I mean, outsourcing to tons of people, but as far as the core team, I've always found it to be pretty small.
Right. Okay. Can I just ask you a question about your views on certain things as independent artists go? We were just talking about how the major artists and how basically they, I guess, signed with major record companies, and back in the day they would be given large advances. I'm not sure exactly how much the advances are now, but just to make it clear to a lot of those up and coming new artists that when a record company gives advances, that's all recoupable, and so these artists have to, that means they have to pay them back. But
sure.
What I just wanted to ask you with we were talking about, answering machines and cassette tapes. I'm in sort of two minds at the moment about the whole streaming aspect. I'd love to know your views on this. With independent artists, they would have to play, I guess a whole album every day for a year to earn $10 from streaming. So how does that, what would you suggest an artist does? They do have a choice. They don't have to have their music on Spotify or whatever, I guess. There's a lot of people who would say, streaming shouldn't be, really available at all because it undervalues music. What are your views on this? I mean, it is, for the indies. I mean, what would you suggest they do?
I think streaming is really, I mean, if I'm for an independent artist, I think they should put their music everywhere. I think that streaming for an independent artist is not really a revenue source so much as just another way to build their story. They've got streams happening. They're getting on playlists. That could attract some attention from industry people if it's the right songs, which a lot of times it's not. But if it is, you would get attention. And I think, iTunes and streaming and, that kind of stuff, even selling CDs at shows, like it's stuff that you should do. But to me, that's not the main revenue. The main revenue, if you're an independent artist, the main revenue sources are going to come from either performing live or from going after TV and film placements.
Yes. Yeah.
And, licensing, sync.
Yes.
And, so, when I'm working with an established artist, when I'm managing an artist on a label, it's still the live show. It's still TV and film placements.
Yeah.
And it's also when you're, a known artist, and I'm, in that situation, it's merchandise.
Yes. Yeah.
So t-shirts and CDs and posters and bracelets and
Perfumes.
VIP, like VIP meet and greets, plus the show, plus TV and film placements. So, but when you're an aspiring artist, I think it is, playing live and going after TV and film. And I've seen many, many artists do unbelievably well. I mean, I've known many independent artists throughout the years that are making, $100,000 a year to $1 million a year, and almost nobody even knows who they are.
Right.
And it's a business where it's one of the only businesses in the world where if you don't become Taylor Swift, the individual or the people around the individual think that they failed. And I've literally met and been friends with and worked with independent artists that have literally made millions of dollars in the music industry, or hundreds of thousands of dollars in the music industry. And often, not always, but sometimes they view themselves as they completely failed.
Wow.
And I've thought to myself, what kind of business in the world can some 20-something-year-old person, or 22 or 24-year-old person, or 20-year-old person make $200,000-$300,000 and then turn around and say this was an utter failure?
Wow. Wow.
And so the music industry, to me, it's almost like, if you don't become the CEO of the company, you've just completely failed. And it's no, there are senior VPs and directors. And so there's tons of people making a living in the music industry. And many of them are making a really good living, better than most.
I guess maybe
So.
A lot of the indie artists are just thinking solely on their music. And in Australia, unfortunately, our live scene here is not great. Maybe in Melbourne and in Perth, it's really great. But I'm in Sydney, and unfortunately, it's a little bit not so great at the moment. It's not like the good old days when you just go to the local, and go and check out a band, and it was great. But it just doesn't happen like that anymore here. But I think what I was just about to say is that I think a lot of independent artists are still thinking that they are only focusing on their song to become a major hit, like a Taylor Swift. And they need to get their head out of that sort of mindset and not even try to compare themselves or even try and do the same thing, because, one, they've got the whole team behind them, they've got a big record label behind them, and they've got a whole, they've got a whole system working for them. So, I
would say that, to me, if an independent artist is laser beam focusing on how strong are their songs really, and if the laser beam focus is trying to get the strongest possible songs, that's where, you're going to either have a lot of success or you're going to have potentially Taylor Swift success. And, that's where it can really turn into a real deal career. And, and that doesn't mean that the song has to blow up for there to be a career. I mean, I was talking to an artist yesterday that I helped get a deal for, and he kind of wants to remain a little bit more of an indie vibe, and he doesn't want to ever have this major vibe around him.
Yeah.
And he really wants to continue touring colleges and so, it just depends on what the artist's vision is.
Right.
But to me, everything always comes down to so many factors, but the core of it, the bullseye, is always the song.
Do you think that although it is kind of necessary in a way for independent artists to do this, but do you think that maybe they're just churning out the songs too fast?
Way too fast.
Yeah.
And with almost always with the wrong people. And
so we're losing that quality. We're losing the depth of the song. We're losing what a great song really should be, just for the sake of releasing music.
Or just for the sake of the people that they're working with making money.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people that these aspiring artists are meeting care more about, there's nothing wrong with somebody earning money. People deserve to earn money if they work hard for something. If somebody's spending 40 hours on something, like they should get paid something. But so, to me, no issue with somebody getting paid. The issue is, often to many, many people in the world, not just the music industry, the deal comes before people, and the dollar comes before people. And what I've always seen in business, and I should correct this, not always seen, but what I see a lot is, people get paid for something and they care so much as they're trying to convince somebody to pay them. And they really care inside, and they're really pushing, and they really want it, and they want that thing. And then they get paid. And to a lot of people, it's like, okay, like I conquered that. I got my check. And then they stop caring about the person as much as they did before they got the check.
Right.
And that's a really, really, really serious problem in our world, but especially for if you're an aspiring artist. So what I've always tried to live by, especially over the last 11 years of my life since I've met God, and, my life has really dramatically changed as far as my heart and my thoughts. But what I try to do today, better said, is always put the person before the deal.
Yeah.
And if I ever am paid for something, it's I care no matter what. I love people no matter what. But if I actually get paid for something, that care and that love and that fighting for somebody and making sure that things are being done right for them, like that goes into overdrive for me. Kind of the opposite of the way a lot of people in the world do it. And and so aspiring artists, when they meet people in studios, or they meet, like, people could be jumping up and down, high-fiving them in a studio, telling them that they have a smash hit, whether it's the biggest producer in the world or the smallest producer in the world. And there's so many times that producer in the studio, deep inside their heart or their mind, they're just doing this to get paid. And the artist is leaving with something, maybe it's okay, but it's not magical.
Yeah.
Because I've found to get hit songs, there has to be sacrifice. And it's not so, it is from the singer. You have to have sacrifice from the singer. The singer has to want it, be willing to work and listen and show up emotionally. But I'm talking about, like, there has to be sacrifice from the people working with an artist. And it doesn't mean that they have to, in a sense, it doesn't mean that they have to financially sacrifice, but they have to give some real passion and real energy and real heart. And the thing is, and the person they're working with actually has to know how to get to a hit.
I guess it's like your team again. You're talking about your team and a culture. You want to have the same kind of team around you that has the same passion that you do, has the same interests that you do, have the same wants and needs. And it's I guess it's, again, I like drawing parallels to business because I'm a very big business head, I'm afraid. For some reason, I don't know why. I just love to do this because I try and, like I say, I always draw my parallels to, look, if a business was to perform this way, you want to have the same sort of people around you. You want to have a great culture.
Yeah, I always tell artists that most of the time the people artists are working with or are surrounding them either aren't good enough or don't care enough. And when you're not an expert product creator, you have no idea if somebody you're working with is good enough, and you have no idea if somebody you're working with cares enough, because you don't have a history with them. And, you know, somebody could look great. Their discography could look like the albums they've been on could look great to you, but you weren't in the room when those albums were being made. Like, you don't know what was like. Sometimes was like, for example, is the Adele record, is the last two Adele records, are they fantastic? Is it because of Adele? Is it because of the producer? Is it because of the person at the record label? Like, unless you're in that situation, is it because of Adele's manager? Like maybe her manager pushes more than anybody else, and maybe if you take the manager out of the equation, the producer doesn't deliver the same results. And so, like, you could be literally, and I'm making this up as an example, but you could literally be with Adele's main producer and be like, this is it. Like, I made it. But maybe it was Adele's manager that pushed the whole team to go farther and dig more, and like a Steve Jobs getting more out of his people at Apple than anybody else could ever do. And created these magical products, and she's creating these magical records. Maybe if you pull that manager out of the equation, you don't get the same result. So, I mean, I know on records I work on, you know, it is a team effort, and I can tell you, like, I am always pushing, like, for quality and torturing details, and so, you know, when you walk into a room with a songwriter or a producer, like, if you don't massively know the business and really know what you're doing, which there's no way to know what you're doing if you haven't done it for at least probably close to 15 years. Or 10 years or whatever. And so, you know, aspiring artists, that's a big disadvantage.
I definitely agree with the whole team aspect, and I think that it comes to the passion that everybody has in that team as well, if they all want the same thing.
Agree.
So, you know, and I mean, I was speaking to somebody else a little while ago, actually, and you know, we're just talking about how to hire staff. And although I don't hire staff at the moment, I've got some amazing volunteers that are part of my team for Music Talks, and I kind of chose them in a similar manner as how I would hire people when it gets to a stage of hiring people to help me out, to create content, to do marketing, to help me out, you know, because things are getting a little bit on top of me at the moment. I'm seriously thinking about getting people in. And so I was having this conversation with somebody who ran a completely different kind of business. And we were just saying that, he was just saying, you know, the thing is when you sit them down and you ask them at interviews, you find out how passionate they really are about what they like to do. So if you're hiring a graphic designer, and if they're really passionate about designing and they just love doing it, they're the people to get. You know,
Sure.
even if they're just starting out, and it really, you know, like, you know, I've got the Teen Talks team on Music Talks, and it's taken me a while. I mean, you know, Music Talks has been going for close to 3 years now, and I've only just recently kind of got the team together in the last, you know, 6 months. And how I did that is just getting to know people and seeing how enthusiastic they are, and their passion and their dedication and their vibe. It all comes through on social media even, and between discussion, and when you get to know all these people. And so, and noticing all that was my, you know, they are my reasons for getting these people on the team, you know, that are part of Music Talks, because I wanted this culture of, you know, you can still have fun, you can still, you know, have a great deal of passion for what you do, and be serious as well. You know, like, you have to have a job to do, but they just love doing it, and I think that is, I've just found so far to date with my experience of having anybody as part of a team for myself, that it's, the vibe runs off of each other, and it's great.
Right.
Even if we, emailing and messaging and sorting out what we're doing, someone would say, "Yo, boss," it's like, "Hey, I'm not really the boss, but we're all part of this team together," and it's just, it's not like, I guess it used to be years ago, where you'd have to look up and there'll be a boss, and that's not the way
Right.
it is anymore. I think team is the way to go, and I think it should be through everything that's done. So, yeah, I definitely agree with, if somebody's passionate, I think it applies everywhere. So, what other businesses do you do then? I've read you're a serial entrepreneur. So what?
I have partners in Los Angeles. We have a company called Radar Label Group.
Right.
We develop, and have launched some very successful alternative bands.
Okay.
And have a new group called the Unlikely Candidates, who just had a Billboard hit with a song called Celebrate.
Right.
And,
so it's all still
and then
music. It's all music related.
all music.
Right.
And then I've got a partnership with a couple of guys with a company called Awaken Records, and we basically developed Austin and launched Austin French in
Right. Yeah.
January, and he's got for the last 7 weeks he's been in the top 10 with a Billboard hit.
Wow.
And then I've got a partner in a company called Higher Level Agency.
Right.
So we're a booking agency. We book speakers and artists on tours and things like that. And then I've got Care for Kids, which we work with a lot of ministries and also non-for-profit organizations around in third world countries.
Oh, nice.
And the artists or speakers we'll work with will, make an appeal to audiences to, sponsor a child that
Right.
evening at the show, at the concert, or the speaking engagement. And that helps feed. I mean, these are families that are generally making under $30 US a month,
Wow.
in third world countries. So, I mean, those are, they've got 117, which I've has always been me. And we, over the years, we've represented and still represent some of the, best songwriters or producers
Mm-hmm.
that there are, in all genres. So,
Wow. So,
those are the basics. So
how many companies are there, or even that you're partnered with and that you're involved with? How many? I mean, how do you do all this?
Well, I mean, there's quite a few, but I've just got great partners, and I am kind of an overseer, a vision caster, and a lot of the smaller, detailed work, I'm not the one executing that work.
Yeah.
I'm kind of overseeing it all.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I could have, I could be involved in a lot of different things at the same time. I am busy.
Yeah.
But and I'm constantly being thrown new business ideas. I actually had a dear friend of mine from Toronto, Canada, call me the other day, and she has this amazing business idea that would launch out of Los Angeles. But it's just, I told her on the initial call about it, that I'm not sure if I have the bandwidth to launch another company. But it's keep in mind, it's 21 years of building relationships. And so, those kinds of things organically start happening and coming when you're relationship, minded. And to me, it's all about the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love having relationships. I love people. I love having people in my life. I don't like when people aren't in my life anymore.
Yeah.
So and as you get older, if you think about it, unless you're connected in some sort of work capacity, it's very hard to stay in touch with people.
Yeah.
And so I love business, especially with people in the industry that become friends of mine, or we have, many years together, because business can keep me at least connected with people that I think are, that I love and I think are stars at what they do. And, and so, that's one of the more exciting parts about business to me, is that it can keep me connected with various people that I really adore.
That sounds great. I'd love to be in that position where I can have so many companies and things that I could actually just oversee but still be involved with. And so are you flying around or driving around a lot, or are you often traveling?
It's both. It comes in waves. I have seasons where I don't travel a lot at all, and I'm just, home every night with my wife, Heather, and then I have seasons where I travel like crazy, where I'm going somewhere different every couple of weeks.
Right.
But it comes in waves.
It's been so great talking to you about this. So I could probably keep going forever, but I think we've been going. Yeah, I'd love to actually talk more about other things, but there's, like I said, I think we've been going over an hour now. But is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? Anything?
Anyone who's listening that's, aspiring to get into the business, I would just, just encouragement, just believe in yourself, bet on yourself. Don't listen to the naysayers. Don't listen to, if I had listened to people when I was pursuing this industry many years ago, I would not have gotten into it. I had many people telling me that, this business is so hard, and, there's so many bad people in it, and don't do it. And, and all that's true.
It is. There's some nice people too.
Yeah. But there's some pretty unbelievable mountaintop moments that await. And if you can just get to the other side, which just takes time and patience and making smart decisions, the life is just, I work a lot. I have some days where I'm, feeling tired or beat up or stressed or whatever it is. But, to be a part of making music that's literally being used by God to save lives, for, people hear a song and don't kill themselves. For people's lives to get changed through a song, which happens all the time.
Yes.
It is so unbelievably rewarding to see those comments come in and see those letters come in, that, that's the fuel. And that's what awaits is, a life where you are working a lot, but you're a part of a song where somebody writes to you and says, I was going to kill myself that day, and I heard your song and I didn't. Yeah. And so that's the driver for me. And if that's kind of the focus of why you're doing what you're doing, I do believe you will find some level of success.
Wow. I'm going to finish with I have 5 fun facts, which are 5 questions. That it's a little bit of fun. I always do this on the segment. So and they're just 5 really simple questions. So other that not they music. There's one music question, I think. And if you answer these 5 fun facts as fast as you can, the first thought that comes into your head. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Your 5 favorite things: sweet or savory?
Savory.
Savory. Water or wine?
Water.
Okay. Acoustic or full-on production?
Full-on production.
Okay. This one is a bit funny. Boxer or budgie smuggler?
man. I'm gonna pass on that one.
Okay.
Out of a crazy respect for my wife.
Oh,
so.
no problem. Snow or surf?
Surf.
Okay. Well, it's summer there, so you surfer.
I am not, but I love the beach, and but do not surf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, I want to thank you so much for having a chat with me, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot of people listening to this that hopefully will listen to the entirety of it and learn maybe more. Learning never ends. I think it's one of the best things in life that you can do. Yeah, and again, look, thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And maybe we can catch up again soon and have another chat.
Sounds good. And thanks for having me.
Guest Talks with Tracy Arbon from musictalks.xyz.